Hello everyone, Johnny Hurricane here from GamersHeroes.com, and why don't you sit back, relax, and let me tell you about The Last of Us Part 2. And before we go any further, I am going to reveal something that is a spoiler, but I believe it is something, it happens within the first couple of hours, and I believe it is something that you need to know before purchasing. So, if you don't want to hear the spoiler, now's the time to get out. If you're sticking around, I don't want to hear you bitching about it later, alright? I warned you. The Last of Us Part 2 starts at the end of the first game, basically. You get a quick little recap of previous events, which is good because it has been a while since the last game, and then you fast forward 4 years into the future, where Ellie and Joel are living their lives in Jackson. Instead of Joel, you are playing as Ellie this time around, and she has become a respected member of the community. You have a quick little snowball fight with your friend Dina and some kids, and then you guys head out on patrol to meet up with Joel and Tommy. The area patrol pretty much acts as the tutorial, kind of help you remember how to play the game, teach you a few tricks and all that business, and then you head off to the meeting point. It's shortly after this that you're introduced to a second character named Abby, and you will be playing as Abby as well. Abby is a much more physically imposing character than Ellie is, and seems to be hunting someone down. That someone happens to be Joel, and she finds him before Ellie and he can rendezvous. Abby kills Joel in front of Ellie, and this triggers the entirety of the rest of the story. The whole main point, revenge. What follows is about 25 to 30 hour story of brutality with plenty of ups and downs, both story-wise and gameplay-wise. The story itself was fine for me. I liked the first game better, but I didn't hate this one. I did have a massive problem with the pacing though. There are times where you go 45 minutes to an hour between story bits, and they can just drag on. Early on, you'll spend a lot of time scavenging large, nearly empty rooms for supplies that you just can't hold anymore. There are some great moments to be had, like Ellie playing Take On Me for Dina, but they're scattered through boring and lengthy gameplay segments. It is the classic Naughty Dog gameplay loop, but extended for too long and in a lot of sections. You find enemies, kill enemies, search empty rooms for 20 minutes for supplies and ammo, get a snippet of the story, and repeat. Now, there are moments, of course, during this gameplay where the characters interact with each other, and those are great for the most part. There's a couple of annoying characters, to be honest, but you're going to get that in every game. Still, not enough of that either. There is enough, but it takes a long time to get to. I think they could have condensed this game by probably 5 to 7 hours. After the Joel part, I felt like the next 6 or 7 hours were also really slow, so about a third, almost a half of the game seemed like it was terribly paced to me. It reminded me a lot of like walking up a dune hill. It's great exercise, but eventually it gets exhausting, and The Last of Us Part 2 has a lot of dunes to cross. And when you do explore, you occasionally get flack from the AI for wasting time, which is like, man, just let me do what I want to do. Now let's dive into the actual gameplay. Shooting has never really been this studio's forte, and it still suffers here. There's an auto-aim option for those who simply don't want to put up with it anymore, but as I figured most people wouldn't use it, I reviewed it not using it. The melee combat is much improved in this game and much more robust. You have a dodge and a multitude of melee weapons that you can use in combat. Melee was the best and the funnest way to go in combat in my opinion. If you rushed at an enemy, they shot you easier, which made sense because you're running right at them. They have a clear shot, but it still robs some of the fun away from it. That and nearly every hit is impactful, and I'm big on that. I want to feel the hit, and when you hit a dude across the face with a baseball bat, you feel it. Of course, running into every battle guns blazing isn't going to work. You're just going to blow through your supplies, and really you want to whittle them down as quickly as possible with stealth. Stealth is almost mandatory in certain spots. The AI isn't that smart, but they do have numbers. So if you go in and get caught right away, you got a ton of enemies you got to fight. Instead, you do this way, pick off one or two, set some traps, trip mines and let them blow up, and then lure them into other traps, and it's not so bad. But to counter this, the enemies now have dogs, and they can smell you. So what I'm getting at, be prepared to hear some dog yelps, or be prepared to be the perfect stealther and avoid these confrontations altogether. Humans and dogs are one thing. The infected are another beast entirely. You have the classic clickers and the runners, but there's a few new monsters as well. The Shambler is this acid spore spreader that's like a tank, basically. It's like a huge fat monster with a bunch of little spore shooters on it, and it just falls down, shoots these acid spores, and does tons of damage if you sit around. Also has a ton of HP. There's also these new enemies called Stalkers, and listen mode doesn't work on them. If they're not moving, you can't see them through the wall. They like to wait around corners and ambush you. Still, above all else, the clickers are still the absolute worst. Their awkward movements make it hard to hit their head, and their potential one-hit bite is still a huge threat. The infected are a joy to kill, much more than their human counterparts. Speaking of listening mode, it has returned, obviously. It's basically the way you track enemies through walls. You listen for them. This is not as OP as it sounds. If they're not that close, you can't hear them. But if they are, you can actually just watch their route and then, of course, set up traps and stealth kill them. It starts off pretty weak, to be honest, but you can upgrade it over the course of the game by finding supplements. You can consider supplements, EXP to upgrade your skills, basically. A lot of these skills aren't required, however, the explosive arrows make life much better. During all that downtime of searching, you'll be finding crafting supplies and scrap. Scrap is used to upgrade and improve your guns. You can get larger magazines, more damage to guns, scopes, and other minor upgrades. Crafting is where most of your other materials go. Medkits, arrows, bombs, Molotovs, suppressors, other traps. All of it is made in the crafting menu, and that crafting menu can be used mid-combat. This means it can get you out of a sticky situation or get you shot in the head. And while we're on the subject of crafting and supplies, The Last of Us Part 2 is generous. For the first 2/3 of the game, I felt always stocked up, never had any risk. Maybe I didn't have shotgun shells, but it was fine. I had pistol, rifle, and arrows. I always had enough of everything, I felt like. I was playing on normal, to be fair, so maybe a harder difficulty reduces their spawn, but the thing is, I constantly ran into crafting materials I just couldn't pick up because I wasn't using enough stuff. I wasn't fighting enough to actually burn through all my supplies. Now that just removed some of the tension from the game because I was always stocked up and always ready to scrap. Not something that's going to bother everyone, but it did kind of bother me. I think it's ultimately because enemies dropped a lot more supplies. At least it felt like they did compared to the first game. Worth noting that I did not run into any bugs or glitches and had no crashes. Didn't experience any frame drops, but my PlayStation 4 was very loud. It's not that surprising since the game is easily the best looking PS4 game to date, and that's probably why there's so much downtime. They want you to enjoy the scenery, and the facial animations are on point. Probably some of the greatest in video games, period. The Last of Us Part 2 isn't as good as the original The Last of Us, but it still warrants a playthrough for most fans. Alright, that'll do it for me. If you liked what you saw and got what you needed, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys in the next video. Later, Gators.